Olis, vamos a probar el cómo se hizo los niveles perdidos y vamos a probar Alcantarillas de Seattle. Este nivel se muestra en un estado pre-alfa inacabado que refleja el aspecto que tenía cuando se eliminó el juego. Ella acaba atrapadas Alcantarillas de Seattle. Al turrón.
In this second deleted level, which is an extended sequence of the sewers in Seattle, this comes on the heels of where Ellie goes into a building and she survives an attack by stalkers and gets thrown out of the window and gets swept away by the current. And then we cut this section that used to be there in the final game. Now you will get to play it. So this was a way to get a bit more interesting puzzles, interesting traversal, figure out how Ellie can navigate the sewers with the fighting current. Ultimately, with a lot of these levels and these sequences, the reason why we cut them were for pacing purposes. But here it is for you in this very kind of raw form that part of it will feel finished, parts of it will feel like assets are missing as far as audio, animation won't be final. But it's a glimpse into what a game looks like when it's months away from finishing. Enjoy.
Algunas animaciones no sé.
¡No me toques!
Quítate, acechador de mierda. Ay, que te la pica un pollo. Wow, 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 wow. Esto va todo gas. Uy, qué bomba. A todo gas.
Vale.
Madre mía.
Cadena Seattle. Vale. ¿Dónde narices estoy?
He dejado los subtítulos activados. Por si hay algún comentario como en el otro. A ver. Porque si no tienes activados los subtítulos,
The
esto
ladder acts as an
no
immediate
saldría.
goal for the player, but being able to climb out is not going to be so easy. To keep levels interesting and engaging, we alternate between positive and negative values the player experiences. Here, it's a positive to have found the ladder, but then a negative to discover it's not the solution. But then another positive to identify the next short-term goal of the doorway. By alternating between these opposing values, we give players what they expect, but not how they expect it.
Habrá otra salida.
Tú puedes, Ellie. Qué chulo.
This level, internally known as Find Nora, was quite long in duration as we had to make Ellie traverse a far distance to the opposite side of downtown Seattle. The sewer section was originally longer than what we released the game with, approximately 10 minutes more. This was one of the few areas of the game that used water flow as part of a traversal puzzle. The player has to go upstream to use the current to get to the platform to reach the other side. We mostly cut this mechanic game-wide, however it remained in essence in the section swimming to the aquarium as Ellie when you were avoiding the waves.
Oh, que se abre, pensaba que nos iba a abrir. Topa mí, topa mí. Vamos a sacar la mochila y todo. Joder. Coño. Pues mira. Estás al diario y todo.
When players reach the doorway and enter into the room, they're faced with a dead end. The real reason for this dead-end room is that on the reversal when exiting back out of the doorway, players are faced with the route onwards. A pipe that they'd not been able to see when they were swept past it on the way in, and something that was hidden from view when on the side platforms. The intention here being that the only option is to go off the standard path in order to search for a way out. Throughout the rest of the level, we also used light to indicate to the player that they were heading in the right direction. At each turn, however, we blocked the direct route forward. Players would know that they just have to keep finding alternative paths, promoting those feelings of being desperate and trapped.
Luz apagada, luz encendida, luz apagada, luz encendida.
We slowly introduced the player to consider climbing into smaller pipes and crouching in these tight spaces. This is to slowly build up to, and encourage, the player to climb into such a small pipe that they'd have to be crawling on their stomach, which is something that the player previously may not have recognised as a playable space, let alone the desired route they need to take. We added a tiny space just to reward the player's exploration with a pick-up item, and we made sure it was something that made sense that you'd find in this area. A canister and all the garbage that had been washed into the sewers from the surface.
¿Por qué metéis así todo tan chiquitillo?
We loved the idea of making Ellie prone through a tiny, dirty pipe in order to get out, as it was a great opportunity to use our prone mechanic. The unique camera setup was created to support crawling in these pipes, as the standard prone camera is much higher above the player. We also created custom collision in order for Ellie to manoeuvre in these tight spaces easily. Initially, the oblong collision capsule around her character caused issues crawling around corners. We put extra effort into the custom corner collision, so the movement experience is as smooth as the main game.
Agobiante, ¿eh? Tan estrecho, y te aparece un chasqueador algo y te cagas.
In order for the player to feel cramped, claustrophobic and desperate, we'd been enforcing the traversal mechanics that allow for a tight environment which promote these feelings. We introduced the use of the squeeze-through so that we can keep the player feeling enclosed and tight, but without repeating the same geometry. Here we changed from low ceilings with wider walls to high ceilings and tight walls to change up the spatial pacing and keep the level from repeating itself.
Arrástrate, Eli. Como la serpiente que eres.
¿Pero qué coño?
What a free.
Esa mirada nerviosa, el miedo reflejado en sus ojos.
Menudo sitio de mierda para morir.
No te vas a morir, Eli. Yo te protejo. A ver.
Originally, we had the waterline much higher here, so players had to swim through this tight tunnel. However, from watching user test feedback, it was occasionally causing people to discount the route entirely and turn back on themselves. So to avoid any risk of this happening in the final game, we present a lower water level so the tunnel is easy to see and commit to using. Although this isn't as impactful without the prone swim, it's the better decision as it means a smooth experience for the player with no backtracking frustration.
Hay que ir por el lado pequeño, creo. Eso está cerrado.
Joder.
We draw the player towards this pipe as it is seemingly the route out of the tight space. Fairly soon it is obvious that this path is blocked. If the player goes all the way up to the bars that block the path, they are rewarded with a pickup so this journey doesn't feel wasted. It was important to encourage the player to try to progress along this path so that they would subtly be thinking of progress in this direction. We hint to the player that there is a bigger, new space beyond this pipe by showing the player the waterfall. This helps players consider the other route that they don't know how far the tunnel is or whether they'd make it.
Pues gracias por la botella.
As we surface from the water and over the crest of the slope, we reveal what is further in this tunnel.
Puta mierda.
A clicker that sprouted and the fungus has grown on the sides of the pipe. It was great to see people who user-tested this area becoming increasingly worried as we forced the player to squeeze past the fungus and inches away from the clicker's face, all the time not being sure whether the clicker might be alive or attack them. Although we aren't as cruel as to force a clicker attack in such close proximity, we do have a payoff for this moment. This clicker momentarily turned into Joel to show Ellie's PTSD from what happened to Joel at the start of the game. Ultimately, we decided to save this moment for the farm level, as it was more impactful there because it could become the centrepiece of that experience. Whereas in the sewers, we weren't able to make it as much of a narrative point and give it the breathing room and reaction time that it deserves, given the tight space.
Ah. Se ha visto la cara de Yola ahí. Está con el trauma. Pobrecilla. ¡Reacciona! ¡Eli! Me ha quedado la muñeca, la chica que no va. Momento triste. ¿No va? ¡Vamos! ¡Uy! Que tenía que darle a encender la
¡Mierda!
linterna. Ya la está sacudiendo. Así nos encontramos aquí al Leon S. Kennedy. O a Claire Redfield también. Claire, ¿estás aquí, Claire?
For the final section, we eventually opened you out into a wider area as you traverse through such tight spaces leading up to this. So changing the environmental pacing makes it begin to feel like we're coming to the end of Ellie's ordeal. An earlier iteration used the current that we'd shown at the start for a slightly tougher traversal puzzle to conclude the sewers. The ladder was clearly visible from most of the area, but the player was faced with a fast-flowing torrent of water they couldn't cross. If the player attempted to jump into the water, they were not able to swim across the ladder due to the water's speed. But instead, they had to traverse the pipe running along the top of the space in order to get across the water.
¿Sí? Esto sí estaba en la parte del juego, me acuerdo yo, que tienes que subir por la tubería, ¿no? Hay que subir por arriba, pero si me tiro por ahí, hay que ver qué hay ahí. Ah, me voy a tirar un momento por abajo, ¿eh? Porque quiero ver qué hay aquí. Pues qué hay aquí, pues hay un mojón de chumbo. ¿Dónde está la recompensa? ¿Dónde está la botella ahí de recompensa? ¿Qué? ¿Dónde está? ¡Uy! ¡Ah, qué asco los bichos!
Using this pipe was retained in the iteration we shipped with, as it's the last of the extreme methods Ellie has to undergo in order to escape the sewers, and what she will go through in her pursuit of revenge.
¡Te caigas, manca! Despacito, sí. Pues había escaleras y todo. Y aquí si te caes al agua, pues adivina lo que tienes que hacer.
The last ladder climb is quite lengthy, and although we could have trimmed it down to a shorter climb, we liked how this last segment of the journey built anticipation for whether there was success at the top or not after all you've been through. Ultimately, the ladder exits out into the subway station, which is how it connects in the final game. Ellie then has to find her way to the hospital from here, crossing paths with the scars for the first time.
Y esto no va a estar abierto, evidentemente. ¿Está abierto? ¿Está abierto? ¿Está abierto? Pues claro que está abierto. Pues aplausiño, ¿no? Aplauso. Pues está chulo. Está chulo. Es que este es un juegazo, es una obra de arte. Se despide Joel Miller. Adiós.